design competitions. They're brutal, especially one like this. An Olympic stadium, global stage, architectural monumentality. It's the kind of project that pushes you past the edge. You've poured into every sketch, made 5 3D models and debated color schemes for weeks. The jury? They're not just looking for something that works. They want genius, grandiose, an iconic structure that they've never seen before. And today, you're walking into the office to finalize your vision. The tension is there. But underneath that nervous energy, there's excitement. A chance to build this concept, this grand stadium, against the very best in the world. So what does a grandeur stadium that has never been designed before look like? The design process for every creative is different. For me, I tend to pull ideas mostly from memory and random shapes that I may have seen days, months, or even years prior. And there it is. I think we got something here.
Okay, I'm rolling, I'm riding.
Once I have the memory of the image, I immediately start to sketch and follow the rule of gestures. So when I first started sketching, I initially drew lines from my vision. These lines become architectural gestures. This for me is what dictates the overall shape, from conceptual form to materials and even facade detailing. I will never break these lines, no matter what. So the building would look more like one homogeneous form as opposed to a clunky structure that changes for the worse and ends up becoming a boring box. For me, part of the process of architecture is identifying each shape with natural elements that we already recognize in everyday life, like a rock, or a mountain, or a tree. This brings relativity to the form, and quite frankly, it's how non-architects would think of the form anyway, if they were to see it for themselves. Once the trunk of the tree idea was established, I started to think about it less like a concept and more like a building. What if we were to have the tree trunks at the edge of each corner of the stadium, like pillars? So multiple tree trunks in an oval-like shape that would have continuous lines, or as I like to call them, architectural gesture lines that span up from the ground to the top of the structure completely unobstructed, without any break lines. Now that would be dope. I continued to sketch this idea out more, but it was pretty apparent that we reached a point where in order to really push this idea further, we would need to three-dimensionally build this. And I knew just the tool to do this. The two-dimensional plane has produced some of the greatest works of art man has ever seen. But when it comes to creating a three-dimensional object, you have to work in a three-dimensional platform. But the plot twist is that the design you envisioned in mind versus what's produced during the sketching and three-dimensional process is almost always very different. It's a deceptive dance all artists have to face when creating any form of art, not just architecture. Getting back into the details of this design, the branches erecting from the ground in an oval idea began to take shape. Slowly, the conceptuality of the sketch begins to fade and the building begins to emerge. So this is a good, simple form. It's technical enough to build upon further and designate real spaces into. But there's something missing, that oomph to give this thing a soul and bring it to a level of iconic design. Every designer knows when the design is final. You get that euphoric feeling when you're in a state of flow and you're coasting on cloud nine as the design is slowly being molded into perfection. This is not that moment. This here is stress and frustration. It still needs to be fleshed out and refined. And in this case, when I'm not feeling what I've created so far in 3D, I go back to sketching. But this time, I sketch over the 3D image. As I sketch, I begin to see where we can potentially create moments. These moments are various forms of architectural expression that eventually become places. When sketching, I started to see more than 4 trunks and 4 trees. Instead, I saw 8. And as I continued to sketch, I saw a human foot circulation path going around the stadium behind the trunks and trees. But the stadium would still be behind that circulation path, thus creating a place where people could walk, shops and vendors could sell, and game goers could lounge. In addition to these moments being created, I saw the facade having continuous lines from the ground right up to the top of the structure. This would give it that natural presence that I seek when creating modern but organic architecture. Now these are all big ideas that I started to feel excited about. I can build a strong overall design over this. So back into 3D we go. And this time, since we're approaching the deadline, we need to cultivate the big idea. That design with oomph needs to be pushed through. I replicate that 3D model, but this time add in continuous silver gesture lines all around the stadium going from the ground to the top of the structure. The tree and trunk branches became smaller and the designated spaces began to take hold. The stadium's central position is in place. Seating is figured and the facade material and expression is now complete. I think this is it. But there's one last thing to do before we submit. And this is my favorite part of it all. Renderings.